My name is Delia Wrenn. I am 34 years old and I have spent 11 years writing down what other people say for a living. On the 20th of June at 5:51 in the afternoon, I stood in a parking lot surfaced with crushed oyster shell outside a converted barn in Northeast Pennsylvania, and I said 2 sentences to my older sister in front of 61 wedding guests. The 2 sentences took 11 seconds. I had counted the way I count everything. I want you to understand what those 11 seconds cost because it was not courage and it was not cleverness. It was $9, paid at a window on the first floor of the Erie County Courthouse to a deputy clerk named Kim Oyalaran who has a coffee ring permanently ghosted into the laminate of her counter. $9, and a form I could have filled out any day for 9 years and 7 months. I did not fill it out for 9 years and 7 months, and I will tell you why. And the reason is not flattering to me. My sister Roslyn had been telling our family and then her fiancé and then her fiancé's mother that there had been a hearing, that a judge had looked at me and found something, that it was in the record and anybody who did not believe her was welcome to go look it up. Nobody ever did. That was the whole trick, and it worked for almost a decade, and it worked on me too. At 5:51, I said the 2 sentences. She was holding a plastic cup of white wine, and she had her hand over her mouth the way she does when she laughs because of the chipped left incisor she never fixed. The cup did not fall. People always expect the cup to fall. It did not. She just did not know yet what was in the envelope in my car. Before I take you back, let me say the usual thing, and I mean it. If you have ever been the person a family relied on and then edited out, hit the like button, and if you want to stay for the whole thing, subscribe, because this one takes a while to arrive and I am not going to rush it. And in the comments, tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I read them. There is a woman in Dunedin who watches these at 4 in the morning, and I think about her more than she would guess. Now, 20 years back, and a street called Wagner Avenue. We grew up in a 2-story house with aluminum siding the color of oatmeal and a screen door that never latched right. So in July, it would swing and bang, and my father would say he was going to fix it and then go sit down. My mother, Corinne Wrenn, kept a mason jar of buttons on the kitchen windowsill, sorted by nothing at all, just buttons, hundreds of them, from coats that had stopped existing before I was born. My father, Palmer Wrenn, worked 26 years at a plant that made bearings, and his right thumbnail was ridged in yellow from a table saw incident in 1991 that he told 4 different ways depending on who was listening. There were 2 of us. Roslyn is 4 years older, and I want to be careful here because it would be easy to make my parents into monsters, and they were not monsters. They were people running an economy they had never examined. The economy worked like this. Roslyn was the one things happened to. Roslyn had asthma, and then she had a bad year in school, and then she had a boyfriend who wrecked a car with her in it, and then she had a job that fell through, and each of those things pulled the household toward her the way a heavy person pulls a mattress. And I was the one things did not happen to, which the family read as a personality trait rather than as luck, and so I became the one who absorbed. When I was 11, I started taking the early bus so my mother could drive Roslyn to a specialist in Meadville. That bus smelled like fryer oil, permanently, and I never found out why. A school bus that smells like a diner at 6:40 in the morning is a strange thing to carry with you for 20 years, but I do. When I was 15, I gave up a band trip because the money went to Roslyn's senior pictures, and I remember being told, kindly, that I was the one who understood. That was the word, understood. Nobody ever sat me down and said, you are the one who pays. It was never that clean. It was 1,000 small allocations, each of them defensible on its own, and the defensibility is the entire mechanism. If you can defend every single line item, nobody can ever prove the ledger is crooked. I want to be honest about my own part in it, because I am not going to stand here and tell you I was innocent. I liked being the one who understood. It was the only thing in that house that was reliably mine. Roslyn got attention, and I got the moral high ground, and a 15-year-old will trade almost anything for the moral high ground. I trained them to ask. I said yes for years because saying yes was cheaper than the 2 days of cold that followed saying no, and I priced it out correctly every single time. By the time I was 24, I was living in an apartment on West 8th with a radiator that knocked, and I had finished the court reporting program at a technical school on a campus where the parking lot flooded every spring. I had a certificate that said registered professional reporter and a steno machine that cost more than my car, and I sat in rooms and wrote down what people said. That is the job. Everybody thinks it is typing. It is not typing. It is listening at a level most people never do in their lives. You learn the shape of a lie by the 3rd year because a lie has a different rhythm than a memory. A memory stumbles. A lie is smooth in the middle and stumbles at the edges. You learn that people who are telling the truth correct themselves and people who are performing do not. That skill was going to be the only thing that saved me. And at 24, I had no idea, and neither did anyone in my family, because as far as they were concerned, I sat in a corner and pushed buttons. 19 days before my sister's wedding, my mother called me at 11 at night, which she never does. The invitation had come 9 days earlier in an envelope with my name spelled with 2 L's. Delilah. Almost. I had left it on the counter next to the mail I do not open, the fence dispute letters from my neighbor Rudy about a fence that is not on either of our properties and never was, and I had let it sit there like something I would deal with when it was over. My mother said, "She wants you there." I said, "She wants me there." She said, "Delia, it has been 9 years, and there is a point where a person has to decide if she wants a family or if she wants to be right. I want you to hear that sentence because it is a masterpiece. It puts the 9 years on me. It does not say what happened in the 9 years. It does not say who stopped answering whose calls. It just installs a door and says, I am the one refusing to walk through it. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher, which was running, and I could feel it through my spine, and I said, is he going to be there? There was a pause of about 4 seconds, and then my mother said, Teddy is 12 now. That was not an answer, and we both knew it, and she went on before I could say so. She said Roslyn had asked specifically. She said there was going to be a dinner the night before at the venue, and Roslyn wanted me at the dinner too. She said, in the voice she uses when she is repeating something she has been handed, that Roslyn was in a place now where she wanted to move forward. And here is the small thing that went wrong, the thing that started all of it. My mother said, and it just came out of her. She said, and honestly, Delia, it is not like you were ever more than the babysitter, so there is no reason it has to be awkward. She was only ever babysitting. I had heard that sentence before. I had heard it in a kitchen 9 years ago, and I had heard it from a cousin at a funeral, and I had heard it, I think, in my own head at 3 a.m. more times than I would like to say. But I had never heard my mother say it as a kindness, as a reason to relax. That was new. I said, I will come. I hung up and I sat on the floor until the dishwasher finished its cycle, which takes 51 minutes on the long setting. And I did not cry, but there was something cold that settled behind my ribs and stayed there for the next 19 days like a coin swallowed by accident. I did not know it then, but that phone call was the reason I finally spent the $9. Not the wedding. Not Teddy. That one sentence about the babysitter, said gently in my mother's voice. 9 years and 8 months before that call, my phone rang at 2:40 in the morning. I was 25. Roslyn was 29, and she had a son named Theodore who was 1 year and 8 months old. And I had held him maybe a dozen times because Roslyn's life at that point was a series of apartments in Girard and Wesleyville with people in them whose names I never learned. I did not answer. I was asleep, and it was 2:40 in the morning, and I had a deposition at 9. She left a voicemail that was 91 seconds long. By 4:15 that morning, she was in my hallway with a car seat and a diaper bag with a broken zipper and Teddy asleep against her shoulder with one arm thrown over his eyes. Which is how he sleeps. Which is how he still sleeps, I am told. She handed him to me in the doorway. She said she needed a few weeks. She said something about a program in Pittsburgh and a man named Curtis and money she owed. And I did not ask questions because it was 4:15 in the morning and there was a child in my arms. He stayed 20 months. 20 months is not a few weeks. 20 months is the entire distance between a baby who cannot say your name and a boy who can tell you a story about a dog he has never met. I registered him for early intervention because his speech was behind. I sat in a plastic chair at a clinic on Peach Street every Tuesday at 4 with a woman named Anne-Marie who wore a different cardigan every single week, and I never once saw a repeat. I learned that he would eat anything if it was cut into triangles. I learned the exact pitch of the noise he made in his sleep at about 2 in the morning that meant nothing and the one that meant everything. I did not adopt him. I want to be very clear about that because it matters later. There was no court. There was no guardianship. There was a woman with a job and a spare room and a sister who called every few months from a different number, and there was a child. And the arrangement held because nobody challenged it. That is how most of these arrangements work in this country. They are not legal. They are just uninterrupted. I could have filed for something. I thought about it in the 11th month and I did not do it because filing felt like a declaration of war against my own sister, and because some part of me still believed she was coming back to be his mother, and because, if I am honest, I was afraid that if I went to a court and asked, a court might look at me and say no. Remember that fear. It comes back. She came back on a Sunday in April with a man in a pickup truck that had a dent in the rear quarter panel you could have put a cantaloupe in. She looked good. That is the part nobody tells you. She looked rested and her hair was done, and she had a job at a dental office in Warren, and she was, by every visible measure, fine. She stood in my living room and she said she was taking him. And I said the wrong thing, and I have thought about it for 9 years. I said, "He does not know you." Her face did something then. For about 2 seconds, there was real fear in it. The actual thing, unguarded. The face of a woman who has just been told the exact fact she has been driving 4 hours to avoid. She looked at her son on the carpet lining up bottle caps, and she looked like she might sit down on the floor. And then it hardened. I watched it happen. I have watched 1,000 witnesses close a door in their own face, and I have never seen it done faster. She said, "You do not get to keep something just because you held it for a while." Those were her words. I wrote them down that night on the back of a phone bill because writing things down is what I do instead of screaming, and I still have the phone bill. They left in about 40 minutes. He cried at the door and she carried him out anyway, and the man with the dented truck put the car seat in wrong and I fixed it. Because that is who I am. I fixed the car seat of the truck that was taking him away, and I stood in the driveway and watched it turn onto Wagner Avenue. And I went back inside and washed a plate that was already clean. I did not delete the voicemail. I did not delete it that night, and I did not delete it in any of the 9 years that followed. And I never played it either, and if you want to know what the shape of a wound looks like, it looks like that. 11 days before the wedding, at 4:11 in the afternoon, a woman named Nadine Loparo called me from a number I did not recognize. I was in a hearing room on the 6th floor with my machine packed and my hands still warm, and I took it in the corridor by the elevator that dings twice on 4 and never on 5, and has done that for as long as I have worked in that building. She introduced herself as Dane's mother. Dane Loparo, 41, the man Roslyn was marrying, a man I had met exactly once at a hospital cafeteria when our grandmother was dying and everybody was polite. Nadine has a smoker's voice she quit 30 years ago and never lost. She said she was sorry to call out of nowhere. She said she wanted to know if I was coming to the dinner. And then she said, and I could hear her deciding to say it, she said, "I hope you do not mind me asking, but is it true there was a hearing?" I said, "A hearing." She said, "Roslyn said there was a hearing. About Theodore." She said, "A judge in Erie looked at everything that year and made a finding, and that is why the visit stopped." She said she does not like to talk about it. She said, "Dane and I never pushed, but he is going to be my grandson in 9 days, and I have been sitting with this for a year and a half, and I am too old to sit with things. I want to describe what happened in my body, because I will not use the words people use." My hearing went strange. There is a thing that happens where sound arrives a half-second late, and the elevator dinged twice on 4, and I heard it arrive after I saw the light change. I said, "What year did she say?" Nadine said, 2017. She said Roslyn even gave her a case number once, at a Christmas, and she wrote it down somewhere, and she was embarrassed to admit that. And I stood in that corridor, and I have taken down the record in something over 3,000 proceedings in that building, and I understood in about 4 seconds 3 separate things. There had been no hearing. She had been saying this for years to people who were not me, and the specific, beautiful, arrogant shape of the lie was that she kept inviting people to check. That was the midpoint of 9 years. 4:11 in the afternoon, in a corridor, next to an elevator with a broken bell. If you have ever found out that a story about you had been traveling around a family for years while you sat inside your own version of it, you already know the exact temperature of that hallway. Take a second and hit like. It genuinely helps this reach other people who have been that person. And if you are new here, subscribe. Because the next part is the 9 years I spent not looking, and I need you to understand why I did not look before you watch what I did on the 6th day. 9 years is not a montage. 9 years is a series of Tuesdays. The first year I called 11 times. I know it was 11 because I am the kind of person who knows. She answered twice. The first time she said now was not good. The second time she said, and this is the second time you are hearing it, she said, "Honestly, Delia, you were only ever babysitting, and you need to let him have a normal life." The second year, I sent a birthday card with $40 in it to an address in Warren, and it came back marked, "Not at this address." The third year, my mother mentioned in the middle of a story about something else entirely that Teddy had started kindergarten, and I said which school, and my mother said she did not think she should say. That is the part that people who have not lived it cannot believe, not the villain. The ordinary people around the villain deciding in small, deniable increments that peace is worth more than you are. my father never once said a word against me. My father also never once said a word. He would ask about my car. He would ask if I was still doing the typing. When I said something about Teddy at a 4th of July, he looked at the grill and said the burgers needed turning and they did not need turning, and we both knew it. And I let him have it because I always let him have it. Somewhere in year 4, I stopped calling. I want to own that. She built the wall and I stopped knocking, and those are 2 different failures, and I committed the second one. I moved twice and changed phones 4 times. Every single time I sat at a kitchen table and transferred that voicemail. There is a way to do it. You save the audio file, you move it, you check that it opens. I checked that it opened every time, and I never listened past the first second. And I want to tell you what the first second is because I know it by heart. It is a breath. It is my sister inhaling in a car at 2:40 in the morning. I know what is on the rest of it because I heard it once at 4:15 that morning, standing in a hallway holding a phone in one hand and a sleeping child in the other. And I have never needed to hear it again. She says, "Dee, I know." She says, "I am not okay." She says, "He is going to be at your door in 20 minutes and I need you to keep him." She says, "I do not know how long." She says, "Do not let mom take him." And then there are about 9 seconds where she is not saying anything and you can hear a turn signal. And then she says, "I am sorry I am doing this to you." 91 seconds. That is the whole thing. Here is my confession, and it is the reason this story took 9 years instead of 9 days. I was afraid to look at the record because there was a part of me, a small and specific part, that thought maybe something had happened. Maybe a caseworker had written something in a file in that year. Maybe a form existed somewhere with my name on it and a box ticked. I had a child in my house for 20 months with no legal standing, and I had taken him to a clinic, and I had signed a school registration form once with my address on it. And I had spent 9 years quietly certain that if I ever pulled that thread, I would find that in some office in this county, there was a piece of paper that said, Delia Wrenn was not good enough. So I did not pull it. For 9 years and 7 months, I did not spend $9 because I preferred an unbearable story to a possible fact. She counted on that. I do not think she consciously planned it, and I want to be fair to her because I am not going to make her into a cartoon. I think she said something once in a kitchen in a bad month, and it worked, and she used it again, and it kept working, and after enough years, it stopped being a lie she told and became the furniture of her life. By the time she was engaged, that story was load-bearing. She could not take it out without the ceiling coming down. The rehearsal dinner was on the 19th of June at the Brambach House, which is a barn from about 1920 that somebody put chandeliers in. 22 minutes east of Erie on Route 5, with a gravel lot that is not gravel. It is crushed oyster shell, hauled in from somewhere by somebody with a theory about drainage. There is a wasp nest under the eave by the side entrance that nobody knocked down all season. I noticed it because I stood outside for a while. I almost did not go in. I want that on the record too. I sat at the top of the exit ramp with my blinker going and the engine running for 2 full minutes, and there was a moment where my hand actually moved to put it in reverse, and the thing that stopped me was not resolve. It was that I missed her, not the woman who took him. The one who was 9 and taught me to float on my back in a lake at Presque Isle by holding 2 fingers under my shoulder blades and saying she would not let go and did not let go for about 40 minutes until I could do it. You do not get to pick which version of a person you miss. I went in. The dinner was 61 people at long tables, and the food was chicken with a sauce that had capers in it. 3 things happened, and they happened over about 2 hours, and each of them was small enough that if I had objected, I would have been the problem. My cousin Junie Wrenn Bell, 29, with a small silver hoop in her left eyebrow that she has had since she was 17, hugged me hard and then, over her shoulder, said, "I am so glad you came. Everyone was worried it would be weird." My mother sat me at the 4th table with the Loparo cousins and not with the family, and when I noticed, she said the seating was done by the venue, which the venue does not do. And my father, at some point after the toast, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You look good, kiddo." And then he said, "Let us just have a nice weekend. Let us just have a nice weekend." 9 years, and that was the entire negotiating position. Teddy was there. He is 12 and he is tall now, and he has her jaw, and he stood by the dessert table for a long time deciding about a brownie. I did not go over. I stood by the doors and watched him decide, and after about 90 seconds, he took 2 and put 1 in his pocket, wrapped in a napkin for later, which is a thing I taught him when he was 2.5. I do not know if he remembers that he learned it. I never will. At about 9:40 in the hallway by the coat rack, my sister found me. She looked good. She looked rested. 9 years, and she was still the woman who came back on a Sunday in April looking rested. She said, "I need to ask you for something," and I said, "All right." She said, "Nadine has been asking questions." She said, "Dane's family is very," and she looked for the word, and she said, "literal." She said, "All I need is for you to tell them the same thing I told them, that you had him for a while, and then things got complicated and it was decided. That is all. Nobody needs details." I said, "Decided by who?" She said, "Delia, do not." And then she said the thing, and she said it kindly, and she said it as if she were offering me something, and I think in the architecture of her head she was. She said, "Do this for me tonight, and you can see him. 1 Sunday a month. I will make it work. 1 Sunday a month." She was offering me 12 days a year of a child I raised for 20 months, priced at the cost of standing in a room full of strangers and agreeing that I was the reason he had lost me. I said I would think about it. That is what I actually said. Not something magnificent. I said I would think about it, and I went out to my car and sat in it. And there was a man in the lot on the phone explaining to somebody the entire wiring problem with a boat trailer at length with feeling, and I listened to all of it because it was the only thing to do. 16 hours to the wedding. If you are still with me, and you have been for a while now, thank you. Like the video, subscribe if you have not, and stay through the last 5 minutes, because the aftermath is the part nobody tells you about. 6 years ago, I sat second chair to a woman named Verna Pelkey, who is 68 now and retired and still writes her grocery list on a steno pad in restaurants because her hand does not know how to do anything else. Verna taught me the thing that ended this, and she did not know she was teaching me anything. There was a man in a civil matter who kept saying, on the record, that there had been a prior hearing. He said a judge had ruled. He said it 4 or 5 times with total confidence, and confidence is contagious, and I remember watching the room start to believe him. And Verna, on the break, in the hallway without any particular drama, said the thing I have carried ever since. She said, "People think a record is a story somebody tells. A record is an index. Every single thing that happens in that building gets a number, and the number gets written down, and the writing down is not optional, and it is not private. And that means the most useful document in the world is not proof that something happened. It is proof that nothing did." You can walk into the prothenotary's office in Erie County or the clerk's office in almost any county in this country and ask for a certification that a search was conducted and no such action exists. It is a standard form. It has a fee. In our county, the fee is $9, and it goes up occasionally, and there is a woman named Kim Oyalaran, 44, who works that window and who has a coffee ring in the laminate and a sunburn every June because she gardens. The mechanism of what happened to my sister was not a secret document. There was no folder I had been hiding. There was a public counter on the first floor of a building I walk into 4 days a week that anybody in my family could have used at any point in 9 years, including my mother, including my father, including Nadine Loparo, including me. None of us did. Because a story told with enough confidence feels like it has already been checked. 6 days before the wedding, at 8:40 in the morning, before my 9 o'clock, I went down 2 floors and filled out a form. I gave the name Theodore Wrenn. I gave the year 2017 and the year on either side of it. I asked for a search of the family division docket and a certification of the result. I paid $9 in cash because the card machine at that window has never worked in 11 years. Kim asked if I wanted it expedited, and I said no, and then I stood there for about 7 seconds and said yes. I want to tell you that I was calm. My hands were steady, which surprised me. What was not steady was that I had to sit in my car in the deck for a while afterwards with the engine off because I had just asked a building I trust to tell me whether I was the person my family said I was, and there is no way to be casual about that. It came back in 4 days. There was no such action, no petition, no hearing, no order, no finding, no judge, in that year or the year before it or the year after it. Nothing had ever been filed regarding Theodore Wrenn in Erie County in any of those years by anyone at all. I read it in my kitchen standing up twice, and then I put it in a plain envelope and put the envelope in the door pocket of my car, and it sat there through the rehearsal dinner while I stood by a wasp nest, and it was still there at 5:51 the next afternoon. The wedding was at 4. It was warm, and there was a lake breeze that kept lifting the corner of the seating chart until somebody put a rock on it. The ceremony was fine. It was actually lovely, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Teddy walked her partway down and then sat with our mother, and my mother had a rubber band on her wrist the way she always does, and she snapped it twice during the vows. Afterwards, Everybody spilled out into the oyster shell lot for the cocktail hour because the barn was hot, and that is where it happened, outdoors, in daylight, with 61 people holding plastic cups. Marisol Frayne, 71, who lived 4 doors down on Wagner Avenue for 30 years and has sent me a birthday card every single year, including the ones where nobody else did, was standing next to me. Her purse strap has been held together with a safety pin since roughly 2011. She said, "You look tired, honey," and I said I was, and she said, "That is allowed." Nadine Loparo came over with Dane, and Roslyn came over because Nadine came over. And my mother drifted in the way she does, and my father followed my mother, and Junie was there, and Teddy was about 15 feet away with 2 other kids, and behind all of us, 2 men were arguing loudly and happily about whether a lake effect band counts as a storm if it only hits 3 miles of coastline. Nadine said, "Delia, I am glad you came." And Roslyn, smiling with her hand near her mouth, said to Nadine, "We were just talking about this, actually." She said, "It was a hard year and there was a hearing and the judge saw what he saw and I have never wanted to go into it, out of respect." She said it to Nadine. She was looking at Nadine, but she said it at me, the way you set something on a table in front of someone. And then she said the last part, the part she had said for 9 years, the part that had always worked. She said, "It is a matter of public record. Anyone can look it up. 5:51 in the afternoon." I did not raise my voice. I have written down 11 years of people raising their voices, and it has never once moved a room. I said, "There was no hearing. You can call the courthouse on Monday and they will tell you the same thing for $9. 11 seconds. That is all it was. Nobody said anything for a while. I counted 7 seconds of it. Somewhere behind us, one of the men said the word bandwidth, for no reason I could determine. Roslyn laughed, and it came out wrong, and her hand went up over her mouth. She said, "Delia, this is my wedding." I said, "I know. I am not going to say anything else about it." And I did not. I want you to understand that I did not produce the envelope. I did not walk to my car. That envelope stayed in the door pocket of a Corolla for the entire evening, and it is in a drawer in my apartment right now. Because the thing about a public record is that it is public. I did not need to hold it. I only needed to say the address out loud. Nadine Loparo did not look at me. She looked at Roslyn, and she said very quietly, "Roz, what is the case number?" That was the whole collapse. Not a speech. A 69-year-old woman with a smoker's voice asking one question with a plastic cup in her hand. Roslyn said there had been a lot of paperwork. Then she said it was a long time ago. Then she said something about a caseworker, and then she said the year, and it was a different year than the one she had told Nadine at Christmas, and I saw Nadine hear it because Nadine had written it down somewhere and been embarrassed about it. My mother said, "This is not the time." She said it twice. Nobody responded to her either time, and I think that was the loneliest thing I have ever watched happen to my mother. My father looked at the tent poles. Junie said, "Wait," and then put her hand over her mouth and did not finish it. Dane Loparo, 41, who shaves twice a day and is still shadowed by 4 in the afternoon, stood there and did not defend his wife of 90 minutes and did not attack her either. He just said, "Okay." He said it 3 times, spaced out to nobody, the way men do when the ground moves. And Roslyn's face did the thing it had done in my living room 9 years earlier. 2 seconds of the real thing, unguarded, a woman looking at the exact fact she had spent a decade driving away from. And I almost softened. I want to be honest about that. Something in me moved toward her, physically, half a step, and I stopped it. Then it hardened, the same way, just as fast, and she said, "You have wanted to do this for 9 years." And I said, "No," I said, "I wanted to be at his birthday." Then I put my cup on the table, and I walked out across the crushed oyster shell to my car, and Marisol Frayne came with me, uninvited, holding her purse with the safety pin, and stood there while I sat in the driver's seat with the door open and my feet still on the ground. She said, "I always wondered what happened to you." She said, "We all thought you had just moved on." I have thought about that sentence more than any other sentence in this entire story. I did not see the rest. I was not there. I know what happened because Junie called me at 10 past 10 that night, and because Marisol told me some of it in the parking lot, and I will not pretend to know what anybody's face looked like in that barn after I left. A person who narrates rooms she was not in is not a witness. She is a novelist. What I know is this. Nadine Loparo made 1 phone call on Monday morning, which is what I would expect from a woman who is too old to sit with things. She got the same answer I got. It cost her $9. Roslyn told the family that I had ruined her wedding, which, if you go by the timeline, is not true, because 61 people ate dinner and danced until 11 and the cake was cut. but it is true in the only way that matters to her, and I am not going to argue about it. My mother did not call me for 6 weeks. When she did, she wanted to talk about the fence dispute with Rudy, of all things, for 11 minutes. And then at the end she said, I did not know she had said all that. I said, you knew she said something. And my mother said yes. And then she said, I am sorry, Delia. And she meant it. It was one sentence and it was real, and it is the only apology I have received from anybody in this, and I have decided that one is going to have to be enough because it is what I have. My father has not mentioned it. He sent me a photograph of a fish in September with no message attached, and I have no idea what fish it was or who caught it. Junie asked me for $2,000 in October. She framed it as a bridge until a deposit came through. She also, in the same message, said she had always known something was off. Both of those things were in the same message. People are not one thing. I said no, politely. Roslyn has not spoken to me. I did not expect her to. I want to say clearly that I am not waiting. Teddy is 13 now. In November, I got a message from a number I did not have, and it said, hey, is this Aunt Dee? And then, about 4 minutes later, before I could answer, it said, Mom said you used to cut my food into triangles. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher again, which was not running that time, and I typed and deleted about 6 versions. What I sent was, yes, it is me. I did. We text now. It is not a reunion. It is a boy who sends me photographs of a skateboard he is fixing and asks me questions about my job because he thinks the steno machine is interesting, which it is. His mother knows. I do not know what she said to him, and I never will, and I am not going to make him carry a message between us. I have not played the voicemail for him. I never will. 91 seconds of his mother at 2:40 in the morning saying she is not okay is not a gift. It is a weapon, and I am not going to hand a 13-year-old a weapon and call it the truth. It is still on my phone. It moved again in August when I upgraded. I sat at the kitchen table and checked that it opened and heard the first second, which is a breath, and closed it. I keep it because it is the only proof that exists of the version of my sister who asked me for help. Not the version who invented a judge, the one in the car with the turn signal on who said she was sorry. Both of them are real. That is the part I have not solved. Here is the only thing I know for certain, and it took me 9 years and 7 months and $9. A lie does not survive because it is clever. It survives because everybody around it agrees not to check, and they agree not to check because checking would make them responsible for what they find. My family did not believe my sister. My family declined to find out. Those are not the same thing, and the second one is worse because it is a choice made over and over by people who get to keep thinking of themselves as neutral. And I was one of them. I did not look either. For 9 years, I let a story about myself stand because I was afraid of what an office on the first floor might say about me. I gave a filing cabinet the authority to tell me who I was, and it never even had a file. If there is something you have not looked up because you are afraid of the answer, that fear is not protecting you. It is just charging you rent. I am not triumphant about any of this. I am tired. I am 34, and I have a nephew who texts me about skateboards, and a mother who calls about fences, and a sister at a wedding I still think about at odd hours. The door is open. Nobody has walked through it. Thank you for staying with me all the way here. If this reached something in you, like it, subscribe, and tell me in the comments the one thing you never checked. I read every one of them. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next.